Welcome to the Pay Love Forward podcast. My name is Dr. Matthew Leavenworth, founder and director of Pay Love Forward. This series shares the stories of Montana's quiet builders of compassion, those who choose to lead with courageous authenticity. At Pay Love Forward, our mission is to build compassionate communities for the at-risk and underserved through mentorship. This podcast is one way we live out that mission. I'm so excited to announce a new partnership with Resilient Stories, an organization dedicated to amplifying the voices of courage, recovery, and renewal across Montana. Together, we're committed to hearing the story within the story, the deeper narrative of resilience that connects us all. In this episode, I had the honor of sitting down with Dr. Bob Wilmouth, physician, educator, and current president of Rocky Mountain College. In 2020, the Billings Chamber of Commerce honored him with the Legacy Award, recognizing a career defined not only by achievement, but by the capacity to lift others up. From heart surgery to the liberal arts, Bob's path reveals a simple truth he lives by: we are all in this together. He likes to say that leadership is more difficult than heart surgery and that 90% of life is showing up. Through decades of service, from the operating room to the college presidency, he's shown up with presence, faith, and a commitment to prepare the ground for those who come after. Our conversation traces the arc of his life, from medicine to mentorship, from leadership to legacy, and offers a glimpse of what it looks like when a life is lived in service of something larger than itself. The world needs better stories, and Pay Love Forward and Resilient Stories intends to tell them. Counting us in, we are officially recording. Bob, it's an absolute honor to talk to you, and I just want to kind of start, just preface this a little bit by, you have been a caretaker to two fields that are incredibly dear to my heart, both as a medical professional, as a heart surgeon, as well as liberal arts education, which I am a product of liberal arts education, for better or for worse. And those, I mean, as far as your legacy is concerned, are probably the two fields where you've poured so much of yourself into. I know family also ranks up there as just a huge part of your legacy. But you know, that's kind of where I wanted to start, is just talking about that, your contributions to both of those fields. And then, you know, this is a podcast, it's about leadership, it's about service, and it's about I think the people that have shepherded our community, and just hearing the stories that drove them to their role in leadership. And so let's start from the beginning. When you think of, I don't know, what you've built, what you've left, what you want to leave behind, you know, the work that still has to be done, where did it all start for you?
Well, and I appreciate your comments about the two different professions. I can tell you exactly when it started. I was in 6th grade, and I had a ruptured appendix. Now, this is about 40 or 50 years ago, right? So they didn't have everything they have now, including antibiotics, good antibiotics, and all the surgical tools and diagnostic therapeutic modalities that they have now. I got pretty sick. I actually had it and sat on it for about 2 or 3 days, so I went in pretty bad. During the surgery, probably a couple hours in, they told my parents that you know, it's going to be tough getting them through, because I was that sick, like from a ruptured appendix. And so they called all my family, and the surgery ended up being about 12 hours.
Gosh, for an appendix.
Yeah, ruptured appendix, yeah. And I had, as I had mentioned, I wasn't diagnosed right away, and then I lived with the pain for a couple days, which is a whole nother deal. But I will never forget this story. My mom relayed this to me. She said at about the 12th hour, and they were worried. They didn't know what to expect. She saw the surgeon coming down. He was about 25, 30 yards away. She caught his eye, he caught her eye. You know, he was sweating from head to toe. You know, his mask was down. The way my mom describes it, he looked exceptionally disheveled. He was in the OR operating room for 12 hours. And he caught my mom, and he just said, he's going to be okay.
Oh, jeez.
And you've been there.
I have.
You know that. And when my mom relayed that story to me, I thought, I want to be that guy.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, maybe this is a little ego or a little pride. I said, I want to be able to deliver that kind of news, right? Work hard, and then be able to do that. And then I had my grandmother, of all things, was very important in my life. And if you combine that story and what she used to say, you need to be a doctor. You have a good bedside manner. And I don't know how she knew that.
Which matters so much, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That ability to be with people. And
yeah, I hope we can continue that. I'm a little bit worried about that. But those two things, my grandmother kept pushing, in grade school. You need to be a doctor. You need to be a doctor, in a very positive way. So that's what started me off on that career.
When you just think of so that surgeon in that story, and he comes out and he's, just totally, like he was at war.
He was a warrior. That's the word that's exactly right. That's well said, sir.
And he was fighting for your life, and your life was hanging in the balance. Right. And, I've been in the waiting room a whole bunch of times. I've never necessarily been on the other side of that, but I have a vision into that world, kind of
absolutely.
And you're in there fighting for 12 straight hours, for focusing every single decision, every cut, every life hangs in the balance.
Yeah, it's and I mean, the real important part of that is how he knew my mom ahead of time, because she was a nurse at the facility, and to just immediately say he's going to be okay, very positive. Yeah, and she just broke down, and then he came over and spoke to the whole family. So I'll never forget that.
Yeah. So what has medicine meant to you?
Well, what happened is I originally thought I was going to be a family practitioner in a small town, which a lot of people, be the go-to for somebody for their whole life, right? Not just pediatrics combined with adult medicine, internal medicine, and that was what I started off with. But then I fell in love with surgery. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I fell in love with surgery, right? The technical part, but it also combines two very important things: anatomy, how we're built, and God, it's just amazing.
So that was part of it. That was what drew you into the field, just the complexity of human beings.
Yeah, well, the complexity of our anatomy, right? How things work. It's like, who invented this? But we'll get to that, I'm sure. And then the physiology, which is what surgeons need, how things work, how things function. So I fell in love with surgery, right? And then one of the things that meant a lot to me was patient interaction. Not just giving the good news, had to give some bad news too, but seeing somebody get better, right, after a surgery, and that was very fulfilling.
Yeah, and
I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did, and what I'm really curious about is kind of the path that led you into this, and so especially when we're talking about medicine, because there are two real dimensions that I want to talk to you about, and the first is medicine, and I come to this conversation with just an enormous amount of gratitude. Both, so my wife is a physician, Kylie is
a very respected one, I might add.
She's phenomenal, yeah, and so I've walked with her through her career trajectory and seen how much she's sacrificed, how much she's put in, how hard she's worked, how much she's suffered, because that's a part of medicine as well, that you carry an unbelievable burden.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, a little bit about journey is, I went to college, obviously, and my grades...
Notre Dame, right?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. And my grades weren't that great, right? I was young. Let's put it that way. But I've changed. But I didn't understand how I needed to grow up. So I didn't get into med school right away.
Yeah.
I applied to maybe 30 or 40 schools. That's what you did back then. And I heard from them all within a week, right? And I remember this as clear as rain. I was home, and my dad asked me, "So what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'll reapply." And, okay, good. What are you going to do in the meantime? I said, I don't know. Maybe I'll look at grad school. I appreciate you letting me stay here. I'll help around here. And he looked at me, "You're going to work. You're going to work." And IBM in downtown Chicago was hiring, and they made a charge where they wanted to hire people outside the business world.
Okay.
They maybe part of it is, liberal arts background or whatever, but they wanted to hire people outside the business world. So I worked for IBM for 2 years as a marketing representative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to travel the country and learn about IBM, about the systems, the computers, and I had to sell them. And I tell you, I look back on that. It gave me confidence to be able to present, right, which I never thought I'd be using. But so that happened. And then I applied again in 2 years. I did take some graduate school courses in microbiology.
To pad the resume a little bit.
Strictly
Yeah.
to pad the resume,
Yep.
period. And I took 2 courses at Roosevelt University, downtown Chicago on Michigan Avenue. Anyway, and I reapplied to about 10 schools, and I heard from all of them. They were all no's except one. University of Illinois says, yeah, you're on the waiting list. So they put me at 105 on the waiting list. And then 48 hours before registration, they called me. And they tracked me down. I was at my desk at IBM and said, if you want it, it's yours. I remember my mom making this sweatshirt that had the number 105 on it. So, excuse me. So I got accepted into medical school. I went to University of Illinois.
Which is your journey is just beginning at that. I mean, I've seen what medical professionals go through, you know, with residency, and then,
Sure.
you've got to go beyond that. And
Right.
so.
And you know, in being completely honest with you, you know, I still needed to grow up, right? You know, what am I, 23, 24? But I got accepted into med school. I went to University of Illinois. It's interesting. The second and third year, there's a branch campus in Peoria, Illinois, which is 3 hours south of Chicago. With only like 30 or 40 kids in it, students. So that was kind of nice. I have fond memories. Your fourth year, as is the case nowadays, you do these rotations all over the country to see maybe where you want to go to your residency. There was a connection. No, correction, I'm sorry. I'm not quite there yet. It was time to do a general surgery residency. And I remember those interviews too, right? But we clicked with the University of Colorado. You know, one of the reasons University of Colorado seemed like a good place was it was hard, and I think what was happening.
Big academic institution,
Yeah,
and they're
but
well renowned. Yep.
Yeah, but also for surgery residency, the call schedule. This is going to sound strange, but you were on every other night, right? I mean, and you were on every other weekend. So you would go in Friday and be done Monday, right, in this general surgery residency. And I knew that I needed, I mean, I was starting to grow up. I knew I needed rigor for some reason. I wanted the toughest program in the world, right? Excuse me. You know, I'm young and you know, I want to quote unquote cut, excuse that expression, operate. You know, so this place was that way. So I spent 5 years there. And there was a connection between the University of Colorado and NYU.
NYU is where I thought that you
New
did
York,
your
New York University. And there was a connection. There was somebody that knew somebody. And every other year, University of Colorado, a surgical resident would go and do the fellowship in cardiothoracic and vascular surgery at NYU. So
Okay, so that's how that,
that's how New York happened. And so I went there for 2 years. That was I mean, when you get older, I guess you complain more. I never used to complain about hard work, but when I look back, man, that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
You literally were on for when I say on call, be available for
Yep.
2 years, the whole time. But, you know, that's probably made me what I am, you know, resilience and things like that. So I did that.
So Kylie shared this story because she had to do some rotations on surgery, and I remember this. I think, and this is when we first started dating, but she'd been up for like 3 straight days or something like that, and then she was asked to be a part of a surgery, an ongoing surgery, and it was like 4 a.m, you know, third day of no sleep, and they stuck her in the back of the room. So she couldn't even see the surgery that was taking place. And you know, she had to be sterile. So she had her whole, you know, keep her gloves above her waist. And I just remember her telling me that story. And she, you know, she was nodding off and like, wake up. And I think there might've been a nurse that was yelling at her for not being, you know, like she'd fall asleep and her
She
hands.
stayed, didn't she?
She did. I mean,
she stayed through it.
Yeah.
And I'll comment on that if I can.
Oh, you please, yeah.
That's kind of it was back in the day. I don't know how it is now, but that was the surgery mentality. And they were testing her. You know, she's probably on a surgical rotation, and maybe I'm a little off on this, but that's just how I feel. And, you know, the fact that she said, sure, and then she stood in the back and didn't complain, she had been up for a while, you know, that's the surgery mentality. That was at least back then. I guarantee you that earned her points. things.
But you think about what that takes, though, right? Because, you know, you talk about the surgeon who saved your life. I mean, literally, that's what we're talking about when you were, you know, in 6th grade. He had to focus, like, just with an unbelievable level of intensity for 12 straight hours.
Right.
And it didn't matter if he'd gotten sleep before that, you know, or like if he was having a good day or a bad day.
Yeah.
He had to go in there and go into battle for 12 straight hours.
Yeah.
And your life hung in the balance.
Yeah.
And so it's a require, like it's not this like old boys mentality. It actually is like, that's what I think about doctors. Like what they're put through is actually a requirement to be able to function at the unbelievable level that physicians function at. I mean, I say this with all this admiration for my wife. I mean, I've just watched, you know, how hard she's fought for, I mean, she goes to work, she saves lives. And I know that about the profession. And so there's so much, you know, I just say that with so much gratitude, but also like it, you know, like you've got to be good.
Yeah. You know, we're going to get to this and I don't want to spoil it, but what I do now is much harder.
I know.
Okay.
That's one of the quotes I highlighted that I look forward to asking you about.
I think I've talked to you and your dad about that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. Yeah, I mean, you get this adrenaline, and you know, and plus, you know, it's your job, it's your responsibility. The longest I was ever up, because reliving after what you said about your wife, the longest I was ever up was, now when I say that, I mean where you don't close your eyes on a couch. Or you know, after you eat something, you don't put your head down in the cafeteria for 5 or 10.
No cat naps, just nothing.
Zero. It was 48 hours.
Oh my gosh!
Right, and I just remember this. And then as soon as it ended, we had this big surgery we had to do. But you get this adrenaline. I imagine it's like what athletes get, and you know, everybody else, and you can get through it. You get through it. I will say, and once again, I'm probably out of line. I don't know if the training is the same. Right. It used to be very tough and rigorous. You know, you hear stories now that if you're on call, like you get the next day off. But, you know, in surgery, if you do that, you miss some of the cases, which is what your wife didn't want to do. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, that's probably another conversation. But, you know, I have some insight into the world of residents, and it's still pretty rigorous, let's put it that way. But they have put some, like, humane caps on. You know,
the other thing is, and I'm not just saying this because you're across from me, but also it's the families that support, right? And you were a supporter of your wife. My wife was just sensational. I mean, through this, because then, you know, we you know, I met her in Colorado, so we were together in New York, and she was a nurse, so she understood. But, you know, there were many times I didn't see her, you know, but she understood it. She had her dad was a physician, so she probably understood that. And then when we came out here to Billings, you know, she always supported. You know, there was never, oh, you got to go in, and never with her. And I think sometimes we can't forget that is the supporting family.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say to her then, if you think back on your career and your, you know, maybe accomplishments, your dedication to medicine and the support that she's given you along the way? What would you say to her about that?
I think if I thanked her at some moment, I think she'd worry about me. Go, what do you? I'll just tell you this story.
Yeah.
We're on a group text, my wife, myself, and my 2 daughters. And I don't know what made me do this, but Liz, my wife, was going somewhere with my daughters, you know, a trip, and they didn't want me, and, you know, I stayed home, I was working, and I don't know what made me do this, because I don't do this enough. And what made me do this is, you know, Liz was checking in and told me where they were and everything, and I said, honey, have a good time, you deserve it, right? And I don't usually do that. My youngest daughter, Maggie, then texted, he's up to something, right? That's kind of our family. And I just don't do it enough. But there are times, you know, that something happens. Well, grandkids have really shown it, where I realize how lucky and blessed I am to have a partner. It's a privilege being married to Liz Wilmouth. So, and I probably should do that more often.
Yeah, well, she'll probably listen to this. So I think, you know, yeah, let's to her. Let's speak to her right now.
Honey, I love you.
Yeah.
No, but just like you, because I know your somewhat of your situation. You know, the family support is very, very important. You know, that they understand this is you've chosen this business, this work, and they're supportive. I think that's a big deal. I think it gets missed sometimes.
But I mean, I think, one of the things that I've been able to, not just to have my wife's back, but I'm so unbelievably proud of her.
Yeah, yeah.
And just what she's done and what she's achieved and how much she's put in. And then just the output, too. Like, she is a healer and a
mom.
And a mom.
And a wife.
Yep. And does such a phenomenal job in all of those different categories. And
yeah, it took me, my wife worked for a long time, but it took me to see what my daughter does. They're down in Colorado, to see what a working mom is really all about. And, it's a shame it took me so long, but when I watch my daughter, and she's married to an excellent guy and all that, but like with 3 kids and one's new, and how she manages that when she comes home from work, and watch her interact with the kids, sit down with one of them's very young, just newborn, but sit down with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old and say, how was your day? And then go to work, get dinner. It's just working moms, man. That's where it's at.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it holds us all together, I think, and it allows us to then do some of these things that sometimes get more of a spotlight, I think.
Yeah, it should have more of a spotlight.
Yeah.
And sometimes I had to see it. It's a shame with my daughter.
Yeah.
Because my wife was that way.
So what would you say when you think about your career in medicine? What are the big takeaways? What are the life lessons? What messages do you have to young physicians that are maybe coming into practice right now? Because it's a complex world that physicians operate in right now, and I think of all of these dimensions, right? Like a loss of trust in medicine. I mean, it's gotten so political. I mean, it's just a complex world that our healers are operating in, and so I'm curious, just from.
Yeah, I would have two things. Now, I'm sure we'll get into this, but like I had a serious illness that acutely stopped me from work practicing, and I miss it still. I don't know if I miss the grind. I'm old now, and I don't know how if I couldn't probably handle it right now, mentally or physically, because you need somewhat of an edge. But there's two things, and I've said this. We have a physician assistant program, and when they graduate, they ask me to say a word or two. I think there's two things. Number one, and I wish I had done this. They need to look at this profession as a privilege, right? As a privilege, right?
Yeah.
I wish I had done that more. Even with this job, sometimes I have to remind myself. And the second thing is, you get old, you think you can give some advice. Is the only thing that'll ever get you in trouble in medicine is your ego or your pride. Ask for help. That's what it's all about. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I've learned. Now, I've been out of the game for like almost,
2004, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what makes it a privilege?
Well, I'm going to get back to how the body works. Excuse me. One of the things that happened is, I got sick, and then Rocky Mountain College asked me to run the physician assistant program, right, without any experience or expertise. But so I went over there and I had to teach a lot, right? Which if I had to do all this over again, I consider being a teacher. It was so much fun.
Okay, yeah.
And I was there for about 4 or 5 years. At about the 5th year, I was starting to get it a little bit. I was starting to get better and thought, man, this is pretty cool. But I relearned medicine. I can't tell you the number of times that I said, oh, that's how that works.
Just
right? Down to the cellular level, for instance, right? What goes all across the cell membrane, which results in X, which results in Y, which results in Z. And so I guess I don't know if I'm answering your question, but what a privilege it is to take care of the human body, that complex mechanism. I mean, if people knew how things really worked, I think they'd be, in awe. So I think that's part of the privilege. For me, this may sound a little strange. I've never said this or been like this. But, you got a human heart in my hands.
Gosh.
Right? Yeah. That hopefully is beating. You're going to stop, and then you're going to make it beat again. Right? And, while I'm in it, it just doesn't, register. But now that I'm out of it and gotten more educated on life, right, not just trained, maybe we'll talk about that. It was a privilege, right? It was a privilege.
What is it?
I don't know if I'm answering.
No, you are 100%. I'm just trying to imagine that experience of holding life itself in your hand, but in a, it's like a physical, like it's a heart, like it's actually in your hand.
Right. But compare that to this. You're in a small town in Montana. Mm-hmm. Pick one. And they bring in a 2-year-old that has a blown pupil, let's say, a pupil that's not working, let's say, because something happened in the head, an injury or something, and you're it.
You're it?
You're it. There's no x-ray machine.
And you're the OB-GYN because somebody else is having a baby in the other room, and I mean, that's rural medicine, right?
That's rural medicine, right? Think about that, right? Instead of being in a controlled environment where everybody in that operating room has a common pursuit. Even the physician across from you is helping. Now, am I being humble? Yeah, probably, but that's not what this is about, right? This is truth. This is fact. This is how I feel. Those family practitioners are those people in rural areas without any help. They're the heroes, right? What do you do? Who do you call? Time is important. So, one of the reasons that I wanted to go to NYU is because I knew it was a factory. I knew we'd be doing 3 or 4 cases a day, sometimes starting them at 10 o'clock at night, elective cases. Yep. I wanted more and more and more because it was very important, as it should be for everybody, for me to be a safe provider. So sometimes, repetition's important, right? Having help is very important. One of the things that drew me to the Billings Clinic, which is where I practiced for a while, the first question I asked when I interviewed was, am I going to get some help the first couple months? Yep, and I did. Does that help a little bit? Or?
Yeah. One more question here on this, because there's one thing that you said, because you were honored, for a leadership award through the Billings Chamber of Commerce in 2020, Legacy Award. Yeah. And one thing that you commented on was the hierarchy of teaching in medicine. And I just thought that was such a fascinating observation that built into the infrastructure of medicine is this, that you're a teacher, that right. And you kind of just described that, like you got to Billings Clinic and came in and it's like, well, am I going to have some help here, because, you have to learn a new system, everything's always different, and you were welcomed into Billings Clinic, and I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I would simplify it. Backup. I think backup is very important. I have it here. Like the success of this place at Rocky is not me. It is having the right people in the right seats. The cabinet vice presidents, the staff, the faculty. I have backup in this job. If I, the final decision, rests with me, and I got to own everything. I get that, but I can go and ask questions and get input, right? Backup is important in medicine because you don't know everything, right? And you want to stay evidence-based. What works, right? So you rely on expertise, people that have been there in the hierarchy, that are older, have seen it before. That's why, and I'll make this comment about the physician assistant practice. Man, if you want to go into medicine, why wouldn't you be a PA where you have automatic backup?
Sure.
Right? You have somebody you can call and say, I got a kid with a blown pupil, I don't know what to do. All right, do this, 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 and this. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the Jim Collins, the right people on the bus in the right places, right? And that's what ultimately produces a capacity for leadership.
You got to have the right people. Well, come on, right?
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah, but complicated, right? And hard to do.
Exceptionally complicated.
Which is, maybe that's a good transition point. That this idea that leadership is somehow more complicated than heart surgery. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, in order to do that, I've already talked more about myself than I have the last year, but it's nice. So they asked me to run the PA program, and I said, what? What's it? Okay, I'm not an administrator, right? And the place is in trouble, right? It was going to get closed, to be honest. This is a long time ago. And, that leadership position as the program director was a little different. We were rebuilding the program, I had credibility from the start, he was a heart surgeon.
Yeah.
Let's help, okay. And then we got the right people in, and now it's thriving. It was barely surviving, and a lot of that has to do with the current leadership, which is better than me, right? But then they came to me, and they asked me, we want you to consider being president of Rocky Mountain College. It's a true conversation. It happened in this room. A couple of board members. I said, are you kidding me? I have no expertise in that area. Zero. I don't know if I'm your person. And then they said, well, what we mainly need you to do is fundraise. Mm-hmm. And I said, you mean ask people for money?
That's usually what that means.
I don't do that.
Yeah.
I've never done that. And I explained it. I'm a dysfunctional Irish Catholic from the Midwest, and I don't ask for anything. And I'm actually being serious. I just thought, are you kidding me? And this is going to sound tongue-in-cheek. I firmly believe they hired me because of my wife. She was at the Billings Clinic with Jim Duncan for like 10, 12 years, and she was known all over the community, as somebody that was razor sharp, and she had success, and they probably thought she could help me. Right?
Here's this guy, he's pretty hopeless, but he's married to somebody who...
See, you think I'm joking.
I don't think you're joking.
I'm 100% serious. In fact, I overheard a conversation once.
Oh, that's so funny.
We got to hire him. His wife will help him, right? And then of course, I'd been out here and I'd been clean. I was going to say clean. Excuse me. I had credibility. That's what I mean. I hadn't been, in any trouble out here. And I was a heart surgeon. I'll represent the institution. What I underestimated was the leadership component. And I will share this with you because I give talks on this sometimes. I don't understand young people that say they want to be leaders, right? No disrespect, but it's like, do they know how hard it is? I didn't have any desire to be a leader. Power wasn't important to me. You don't give it up in the position, but you don't. That was the Springsteen song, Springsteen lyrics. Poor men want to be rich men want to be king, and a king ain't pleased until they rule everything. Right? I do see some of that. There's some power associated with leadership. And my girls told me, don't do it. I have 2 daughters. I said, why? Because you're a sandals guy, you're a hoodie guy, and you are going to be exposed. You're going to have exposure. You do not like that, and all this. And I just said, I can do this. Liz will help me. I'll get some help here. Very cool. I'll be a college president, whatever. I didn't have anything else I could do. It was time to go leave the PA program too and give that to some other leadership. And but I underestimated the difficulty of the job. I work very closely with our provost, Anthony Piltz. He's wonderful. And I said to him the other day, the first 5 years you try to figure out what the job is. Right? The next 5 years is like, what do you do with it? And then when you finally figure everything out, it's probably time to leave, right? And I think that's part of the leadership journey. I find it exceptionally difficult. Yeah. Leadership, right? Leadership part of it. I could write, if I could write, I think I could write a book. And I've told your dad that many times. And I can't write, but it's just fascinating to me, right? And I don't know if I answered your question. My main job was to fundraise, right? But
well, so just to pause on that for a second, because if you could distill out what exactly it is that is so challenging about leadership, just what is that makes it so utterly complex, even though maybe it seems simple on the
managing personalities.
So what have you learned about that?
A couple things. There are some things I do okay. There's some things that I need work on. I'll preface this with I'm extremely results-oriented, and that comes from being a surgeon. I'll finally admit that, right? I'm extremely result-oriented. I'm extremely black and white, but it's a gray world right now, and I have to understand
it's real gray.
It's exceptionally gray. And so I may make it more difficult. I'll be honest with you. We at one of the first meetings I was at here, we were talking about retention. How do you keep students here? And I made the statement innocently, look, you're either a threat or you're an asset to this. Let's decide what you're going to be. I made a statement sometime, culture's important, strategy's important, but results trump both of them. And I've learned, your words matter. People pay attention, right?
So that particular comment hurt some feelings?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, there you go. And it took me a while to understand, I think I have self-awareness, but it took me a while to understand not everybody's like me, right? Which may sound, like, well, where have you been? But you have to understand my environment. I was never out and about, never in the community. I was never in charge of something. PA program was mainly about teaching and fixing it, help fix it with other people. You take somebody who's naive and never been in that and then throw them into this. It was really awakening, right? What else? I will tell you, I look back on this, and I probably should have sat down or maybe gotten some coaching of some sort, And I was adverse to that. You got to be yourself, right? Courageous authenticity. And courage can be lonely, right? Courage can be lonely, but I think it's very important. And I'm very pleased because I do think I'm authentic, and sometimes that gets you in trouble, no question about it. But I should have gotten some help outside when I look back. This is too big a deal. I don't think I've actually hurt the place, but there's certainly some things I could have done or said differently because I came in with a mindset, we're going to get better. Our vision here isn't extremely, I don't know what word to use, but our vision is very simple. It's about having a mindset of growth, of getting better, self-improvement. And if we each individually do that, we will evolve as an institution, right? I say this in jest sometimes. We are not on a quest to be the best in the West, which some people would like to see on top of a strategic plan.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, we're not going to be Stanford. We're Rocky Mountain College. We're not going to ever be MSU. We don't want to be Carroll. We don't want to be MSUB. We want to be Rocky Mountain College. We want to worry about ourselves, and we want to get better. So that mindset, it took a while for people to understand that. Yeah. Right? Because that's not...
But it's a growth mindset. It's
right.
Which is very different from, you talked about being just results-oriented.
Right.
Which really works in a surgery setting when everything is controlled, every variable. But in a human setting where everything is gray, it's almost like you have to reach for something else. So probably for you, just letting go of that like, I just want to be the top, I just want to be the best, I want results, and then reorienting towards just wanting to grow.
Yeah, you said it better than I'll ever said it. That sums it up. And I will tell you, I still do go through, why wouldn't you want to get better at what you do? I couldn't do this 10 years ago. You would have stopped it a minute in and said, I'll call you, Bob. We'll do this again sometime. And I never would have heard from you. I couldn't talk like this. I'm a much better college president today than I was 10 years ago.
So you've grown. Yeah.
But the minute I stop thinking I've got it figured out, the minute I say I don't need to get better. I don't know if that makes sense, but you nailed it.
Well, so Bob, I want to ask one more question before maybe we leave medicine behind and move towards a conversation about the college and about liberal arts and the importance of its role in our community. But I just was was reading about your history and thinking about what you went through in 2004, where you lost, and maybe you can talk a little bit about whatever the health issue that you faced, but it took away what you'd invested your entire life in. It took away a part of your identity. It took away your capacity to be a healer in the way that you had spent your whole life learning how to do that. And I can only imagine that must have been extraordinarily disorienting.
Yeah, never really talk about it, but I will with you. It was interesting because, and I do have to share this with you. So I had a colon rectal cancer, right? And they take it out, and almost all of the nodes, N-O-D-E-S, around it, drainage system, they have cancer in it. So that immediately puts you in a class C. It's called, if I remember correctly, and maybe they've changed it, Duke's classification. And that immediately meant you need radiation and chemotherapy. I'll never, and I had a great surgeon here, Dr. Gramalis, who's since retired, and his partner, Dr. Gregory. I remember John Gregory coming into me and telling Liz and I, you're going to have a tough run.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was an eternal optimist, right? Fight, hope. And this is going to sound very strange, but I wasn't scared of dying, right, for some reason. I don't know why. What I was worried about were my kids and my wife and how they're going to take this, and my parents. I tell my mom, and she says, I wish I could take your place. Oh, my God. I was more worried about what you leave behind for some reason. But I went through that, and a year later, they found something in my liver.
So you received treatment. It was supposed to be effective. You thought maybe you were on the upturn, and
I knew.
They found something else.
Well, let me tell you, with Class C, you have a 25% chance of being alive in 5 years. Yeah, so that that's evidence-based medicine, but that didn't seem to really bother me. I maybe it's the spirituality or whatever, or heaven, but. That didn't. What bothered me with my girls, my wife, my folks, my brothers, my little sister, they're going to take it hard if I go early and everything. And I don't mean to be so crude describing this, but so I went through the treatment. I had to stop practicing, right? I tried to practice, come back, wearing a chemotherapy thing, right? But I just said, hey, I'll help out if I can. But then I got a hit in the liver. Right, a metastases. It spread to my liver. Okay, you know about that. So they had to take out part of my liver, right? So that puts you down to like a 20% 5-year survival, particularly if you have a solid metastases. And that's all it was. It was one big hit in the liver. And that's when I said, okay, it's time. And so my wife was working, and I became Mr. Mom, which, by the way, I think was part of the best time of my life. I used to pick up the kids and take them to Taco Bell until that got stopped. But I'll never forget it.
That got stopped for, heart surgery related issues.
What my daughters turned me in. It says, Dad's taking us to Taco Bell, and I can't do it anymore. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. But it was the best 2 years of my life. But I then decided to do some work, nonprofit work with this company called IHI, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. I thought, okay, good. But then it came, and it spread to my liver, or my lung, excuse me. That gives you...
So it metastasized multiple times.
That gives you a 5% chance at being alive in 5 years. So they took that out. I got through that. I don't know what the timing was, if it was a year or so, and I had some other issues going on as well. I ended up with some things mentally that I had to get through, but had a very supportive family. And I was thinking I might be one that doesn't make it. But, I kept a stiff upper lip. I kind of was resigned to hiding, I'll be honest, because this is going to sound, I didn't want anybody feeling bad for me, right? It's weird, but yeah, 5% 5-year survival. And then I became Mr. Mom again for a year or two, seemed to get better, straightened some things out in my life mentally, and that's when, and then what happened is when I really got involved with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement out of Boston, a nonprofit think tank that's about improving patient outcomes, I got to travel the country. It was like a blessing, man, and give speeches on getting boards on board. So you go to hospital boards and you talk to them about high quality, cost less. If you do everything perfect, it will cost less to your institution, right? Which makes sense. All about value. And I did that, and I learned a lot. And then Rocky came to me with the PA program.
With the PA first.
You got
and
it.
Then, yeah. So, Bob, and we're on, sacred ground, I think, for both of us. And just the background for whoever's listening to this. My son has Down syndrome and then was diagnosed with leukemia at 1 year old. And I also had to become Mr. Mom. I stepped away from my private practice, and we had 6 rounds of chemotherapy and thought we had beaten it. And then for AML, which is the type of leukemia Gentry had, there's a 90% recovery chance. Like the prognosis is really good for him. But we came home, we thought we'd beaten it, and then 3 months later he relapsed. And we had to go back, and to me, it's part of the gratitude I have for you. It's part of the empathy I have as you're telling your story. But we went from 90%, positive prognosis to 10%, right? It was just totally inverted. And Denver Children's had never done a bone marrow transplant on a kid with Down syndrome before. And so, there's only 30 to 50 of them that have ever been done, just period. Like the research is just negligible on it. And so just had to, it's impossible to, all right, so one thing is what they did for my son is the equivalent of landing a man on the moon. Like it was science fiction. And so for me, I have this immense gratitude to the intellectual capacity, just the technical capacity that we have now it's a byproduct of research and brilliant people coming again and again to fight for each other. And so there's that aspect of it, but also I had to walk through that very human journey of fear and doubt and hopelessness. And like even looking back, I'm not exactly sure how I got through that. You do it a day at a time, I guess.
Yeah. Can I comment on that? Or,
please.
I think, the support is important, with your family. I mean, you took over as Mr. Mom, so, your wife could practice. And
she kept working through the whole thing and flying back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think sometimes you do take it one day at a time sometimes. For me, I prayed a lot. I'll be honest with you, almost every day. And I'd set some time out. But there's two things that happened to me I'll never forget through the so-called journey. And, sometimes you hear I call them tiny little miracles, right? But two things happened to me. When I went back to help out and practice after the first hit, when I say hit, I mean, the first camps, okay, yeah. I was scrubbing in with my partner, right? And we were washing our hands. He goes, "How's it going?" I go, "I don't know, man. This is going to be bad, 25% 5-year survival, dude, and going through the chemo and radiation. I'll help out as much as I can." And without looking up, he goes, "You'll be fine." And I'm like, I was a little taken back because he's a physician, right? I said, "Well, dude, the numbers don't look good." And he was scrubbing. I'll never forget this. And then he looked at me and goes, "You're one of the toughest son of a guns." I said it differently. "You're one of the toughest son of a guns I've ever met. You will be fine." Huh. That carried me for a while. And this is not about me.
What he said was a sustaining life force for you.
Yep. Oh. And I needed it. It was at the perfect time. Now, I think that's how God speaks to us, but that's another. And then this is something different from me. I have a granddaughter with spina bifida that I'll share with you. We're very blessed. And when it first got diagnosed, there was some discussion that there may be some other things going on. They had to do some genetic testing. There may be trisomy 21, some other things, which you're probably familiar. You've been through everything. And, so it wasn't just the spina bifida. It could have been some other things, which would be a real hassle. And I was speaking with our provost, who I work very closely with. He runs operations, and he knows me. And, I'm explaining this to him. And I'm sad, and he says to me, "Well, things will work out, you'll deal with it." And I said, which is kind of how we talk to each other. Mm-hmm. He has the same mindset I do in a lot of ways, or I have the same mindset he does. And I said, "No, dude, you're not getting it. Let me explain what this is. There's a hole in the bottom of her spinal canal, okay? Now they're doing genetic testing, and there's a chance that she could have some other things going on. She could have a heart that's backwards and everything. Doesn't matter. You'll get through it. You'll deal with it." The third time, I got upset, and I can't. That's how we deal with it. He says, "You're not listening to me, brother. I'm trying to get across to you how serious this is." He goes, "I know it's serious. I get it. But you will deal with it just like you have with everything else in your life." And man, did that carry me.
That's another one of those that just came through and really connected to your heart.
I call it a tiny little miracle. And I carried that with that, and was able to, show strength for my daughter and her husband and my wife and everything. But sometimes I think those things happen. There's personal connections. Somebody says something to you that you don't expect, right? And boom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just kind of contemplating the way it's almost like God works through us.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. If we're on that, you pray, give me a sign. See, I think those are the signs. I think those are the little miracles. I think that's how it works.
I think so too.
Yeah, I do.
What an interesting idea, though, that God talks to us through each other.
Yeah, there's. I'm sure you've heard this. As if we move into into this subject, is the thing that it always resonates with me. And sometimes I've used it in here, and I'm not sure people understood it, but it's you've probably heard it, and I'm maybe paraphrasing a little bit of, there's a big flood coming, and the farmer won't leave. He says, God's going to protect me. I'm going to stay here. A helicopter comes by and says, come on, we got to get out. I'll be fine. God's going to protect me. Boat comes by. Big flood's coming, man. You got to get out, get on board. I'll be fine. Flood comes, he dies, loses everything. He's up in front of God. He says, why have you forsaken me? God sent you a helicopter and a boat.
Come on, man.
Yeah, come on, man.
What else do you want from me?
And I don't... Yeah, well, that part, yeah. Yeah, that's what I would say. But it's that resonates with me. I think that's how it works. And it took me a while to realize that.
So that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, because faith for me has been a journey, an ongoing journey that is not resolved in any way, shape, or form. But it's you're a man of science, right? You know the anatomy of the body, the anatomy of the brain, the physiology, the complexity of the universe, and sometimes you think of those two things as being somewhat opposed or polarized. Faith and science. And so you're somebody, even just hearing you talk about those tiny little miracles that have carried you through what transcends science, right? Like, because the statistics, I just think of, when doctors sat down with me and told me the statistics for the outcome for my son, how disconnected I was from those numbers, and how truly just personal, and heartbreaking, and so there's this dichotomy, right?
Yeah.
Between science and faith.
I'm if I may interrupt,
Oh, yeah.
I'm laughing at something else I just thought about. I had another surgeon partner say to me, we were talking, and he goes, hey, dude, it's 0 or 100%. You're either going to make it or you're not. Mm-hmm. For some reason, that resonated with me too, right? This, like you said, the numbers, the statistics, especially, the second time around when your child relapsed. And then, I had the hits, and they give you all these numbers. It's 0 or 100. Mm-hmm. But as long as it's not 0, you have hope. Mm-hmm. And hope is a wonderful thing, I think.
Yeah, I think even with his treatment, because we were at a place where it's like, well, he might not even get approved for a transplant because he has Down syndrome, and they don't approve transplants for kids with Down syndrome.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, this is, a little bit of an aside, but a piece of scientific research, medical research, came out so this is after he's relapsed, so his life is hanging in the balance, and this article comes out that changes the recommendations on treatment for relapse with AML and Down syndrome. Had that article not come, and this is scientific research on cancer, which currently we're cutting right now from a federal perspective, but this is an article that, had it not come out right when it came out, and you talk about tiny little miracles, this allowed them to justify going to transplant for a child with Down syndrome. Prior to that, if this article had not come out, and it was a meta-analysis of the 30 or 40 cases that have ever taken place where they've actually given a transplant to one of these children, and so this article comes out, and it allowed us to proceed. And you just can't even. And there's so many things in my story with Gentry, and to me, Gentry is just an angelic being. You got to meet him. There's just something so unbelievably beautiful about him. But it was always that, right? So we were like, okay, prognosis is like 5% maybe, and then you do the next thing, you do another round of chemo, and oh wait, his they're not detecting blasts anymore, so that then it's 10%, and then you do another round of chemo, and then it's like 15%, and then you find the stem cells to actually do the transplant, and then it's like 25%, and then the transplant takes. And the labs are coming, and then it's like 50%, and then and it's like this incremental step towards.
Man, you could be a hematologist.
But you're right. At the end of the day, it's 0 or 100, and my son's alive right now.
Yeah.
And so are you.
And we both have hope, and my daughter has hope, or my granddaughter with spina bifida has hope. Things are getting better. Yeah, it's amazing. I will say this. You talk about your son. I love all my grandkids. But for some reason, the 6-year-old with spina bifida, I have a special relationship with. It's like, I think she's special. I hate to say that. People say that all the time. I'm addicted to her. It's and I have an addictive personality, so I just when I'm not, I think about her all the time. You know, the other two are very cute, and we spend time with. My wife said this the other day to somebody. I could spend I have spent 8 straight hours, and I don't know if any of it has to do with the hardships they have, right? That I don't know. I always marvel at parents and caregivers that has a special needs child and the sacrifice they make, and I know you've been there, and I'm not just saying this because I'm across from you, but I always marveled at that. But this relationship with my 6-year-old grandkid is just unbelievable. It's I don't know how to describe it. The other day we were down there, right? She likes to play these games, right? And one of the games is if we're eating, I can't remember what she calls it, but we have to ask questions of each other, right? So I'm sitting across from her, and I had to go first. She's 6, and I 6 going on 40, I think. But I said, so tell me a little bit about yourself. And she goes, well, I'm Kennedy Lou Barnes. Okay, who's your best friend? She says, Poppy. This is what she calls me, you know. So that was fun. Okay, great. But who's your best friend at school? And are you happy? Yes. Okay. You like school? Yeah. You're in good shape. You're doing okay and everything. And she looks at me. Well, no, I have spina bifida. I broke down.
Just like
she's 6 years old, and she pronounced it better than me, and because her parents have talked to her about it. And no, I'm not okay. I have spina bifida. I don't know why I share that. It's hearing about your son. It's just amazing.
But there's an awareness there for her, and I mean it's so. I mean, because I think too, to me, like I watched my son go through the most brutal thing I've ever watched, and I mean, you know something about that because you've had to go through chemo.
Yeah, not like him. He had a serious thing. I'm interrupting you. Somebody said this to me. It's a little crass, but your son and my 6-year-old they don't know anything else.
No.
Right? They don't. They think this is it, right? This is the way it is and everything. Man, think about the resilience you build up for the rest of your life on something like that. Take on the world, man.
It's really interesting, too. The person I interviewed right before this for the last podcast, his name's Mitch Bond. He has spina bifida. He's one of my personal heroes. He's just an amazing human, and just as he's got a nonprofit and he's got a podcast where he interviews athletes. I mean, he's just a total rock star. Just did a TED Talk, and I mean, I just don't. We're talking about what is transcendent about these little kids. I also have a niece with cerebral palsy, and just what my sister has gone through, and what my son has gone through, and what my family has gone through. But there is how you're talking about this little girl, your granddaughter. And I don't know what it is that makes them so transcendent. These little children who have faced
that have been through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have this theory too, and this is kind of back to the question of faith and science. And it's not a theory, right? It's my interpretation of what the Scripture, what Jesus has called me personally to do. And there's one passage, and it's that the stone that was rejected has become the cornerstone. And to me, this is. It's so central to everything that I'm after right now. And my son is one of those stones, and your granddaughter is one of those stones. And I think of kids at Tumbleweed. I think of it's those who suffer. It's something like that. And if we make them the cornerstone of what we build, it's like the world gets better, right? Like a world that my son can inhabit is a more compassionate world. It's a more generous world. It's a more And I talked to Mitch quite a bit about this, like the world that he wants to build, which is accessibility, which is, we call it the episode "Loving from the Sidelines." It's a world that celebrates not just the people that are in the spotlight, but the kids with spina bifida, and the kids with cerebral palsy, and the kids with Down syndrome. And I watched that in my daughter's life too. Like there's something about my son that has elevated her. And it's like there's just something so powerful about that. And to me, it's like if we can turn the tables, if we can invert this process. It's even like what you said earlier. To me, the best leaders are the leaders that don't actually want to be leaders.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Yeah, I being naive sometimes helps. Yeah, I've never thought of that, actually. I talked to your dad about this. I agree. We've lost compassion, right? We've lost compassion, decency. There has to be some sort of change, right?
And so what if these little children of ours, what if they're the ones who get to teach us?
Yeah, that's what I was headed, because of you, because of what you said. I've never thought of that. I worry. You know, I know the division, the way people, especially with the social media, talk about each other, and you know, and maybe I'm naive or something. I was like, can you do that? You know, 10, 15 years ago, I was like, can you get on, well, we didn't have social media, but can you do and say something bad about another person without really knowing what went on? Now, if you do something that upsets somebody, it's whoa. I mean, it's just gotten to be ridiculous. And I don't know what's going to turn it. I will say that, you know, everybody talks about this, and I think it's probably true. It's the pendulum. And what I've noticed is there's a lot more people talking about faith. Mm-hmm. And I think, I like what you said. I had never thought about that. That's very sophisticated and critical thinking. You know, maybe they're the ones that'll change. But I think faith has to be part of it. We've got to get back to that. And, you know, faith has, you know, how you feel it, there's a lot of different ways, right? I get it, right? But we need to get back to that.
So how for you is faith integrated into your leadership, into your legacy?
Sure. I'm going to say a couple things. This is not sophisticated, all right? A lot of it's the way I was raised, right? And my parents were strict, now that I think back on it. Yeah, they were wonderful, right? They were strict. We were raised Catholic in the Midwest. You know, we're Irish Catholic. But we went to church every day in Lent, right? It was just the thing to do, right? I didn't know why we were doing it. I guess this is normal, right? I was young. My dad went to church every day till he got old. Every day, 6 a.m. Mass in downtown Chicago. Mm-hmm. My mom would wait to the last minute and go Sunday night at 7 o'clock. I just thought of that. But we were raised that way, you know, Catholic education, St. Anne's grade school, you know, and then, you know, you go to Notre Dame, you know, so, but, and I said this when my mom passed, I had to speak. I don't understand people that think this is it. Just this is it, you know. If we get 75, 80 years, whatever, 85, 80, 75, on the earth, on the planet, that's it. Mm-hmm. It's over. I can't believe that. I just can't. There's got to be something else. There has got to be something, quote unquote, better. And there's probably something worse. If there's something better, there's probably something worse. I warned you that my thinking is very simplistic, and I hope it's critical, but this is how I think. I believe there is a higher power, right? And it's God, right? The Almighty. Part of it is this human body, how it got made. I know I've said on that several times. There's something out there. There's something out there. And probably because of the way I was raised, you know, the strict Catholic environment, which isn't always the right environment, of course, but, you know, and accept other faiths. And I have gotten more educated in this job. Mm-hmm. I was trained all my life. You know, baseball didn't work out at the age of 3 when you can't hit, run, or throw, right? But I'm actually serious. But that went away quite early. And then I trained all my life to be a physician, to be a heart surgeon. And the other stuff, you know, it didn't matter. This job has afforded me the opportunity to get educated, which is a big difference. Part of my education is reading and understanding and recently talking about spirituality. Mm-hmm. When I first started, you know, I'm careful, right?
You have to be.
You have to be. Or do you? When I first started, I was careful, right? You know, because I have to give speeches and talks and meet and everything. I was very, very careful. You know, I took inventory, tried to read rooms. I kept my mouth shut. It's interesting, and I'm probably not answering your question originally, but what I've done the last 3 or 4 years, I have not been shy about faith. I quoted scripture on Friday night in front of about 500 or 600 people. We had our big event. It's called Black Tie Blue Jeans. It's our big signature fundraising, scholarship fundraising event. Halfway during it, I quoted scripture. I never would have done that 10 years ago. I've talked at commencement about the Almighty. I end everything. May you be protected every step of the way by the Almighty. So I've gone a little bit through a transformation now, which is why I kind of snapped when I said maybe we should be doing more of that. Maybe we should be talking more about that. Now, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of it is my upbringing, right? And that has morphed into, more critical thinking, but there has to be something out there. This isn't it. And I mean, I respect how people feel faith if they decide to, right? But I don't understand people who think this is it. How do you live? How do you live?
How do you wake up in the morning?
How do you wake up in the morning and just go, well, and I'm 68, man, with some medical stuff, right? If I didn't think there's something out there, right? And if there's not, but I hang on to that, that hope. That's my spirituality. I have already mentioned what I call these tiny little miracles. I think that's how the Almighty speaks to us. Right. And then I think...
Do you find that you see more of them?
Yes, I do. You mean recently?
I just mean, you talk about your transformation where sort of God is making more of an appearance in how you lead and maybe a softening of the heart towards this idea of faith.
Yeah.
Almost out of necessity, like, boy, there just has to be.
Yeah.
Like, this just can't be enough. And I wonder, as your heart has softened, as you've gone through that transformation, how that has changed almost the lens that you view the world, and then what has come from that change.
I have always thought I was a confident guy, right? Maybe I get people tell me you're too confident. Well, they do, and it's not. It's not. And I've also been told that you're humble. Humility is important and intensifies credibility. Don't get me wrong. That's not it. I'm superstitious. I'm a big believer in karma. Now, maybe you're going to probably stop this interview and say, okay, that's enough, right? Because it's going to sound strange. I am a big believer in karma. And what I think has happened to me over the past several years, I'm actually more confident by allowing my faith to speak, if that makes sense. I'm all over the place on this, but how come you don't, how come you're not telling everybody how great things are? Well, first of all, if things aren't great, I'm not going to tell them it's great. I can't do that. I'll fundraise for you, but only if the place gets better. I am not a salesperson, right? But I'm trying to put it into words. I seem to be more not at peace because this karma thing is probably how I express this. Is they talk about you have athletes come on say I want to thank the Lord Jesus Christ first. Okay, words are one thing, right? Which is great. I get it, right? Action's more important than words will ever be, right? And I don't know if I'm explaining this right. The karma comes from I want to please the higher power, right? And I know the higher power is humble. And I know that if at noontime I go in there, this is going to sound strange, with high school counselors from all over the state, and it hits a home run, right? And what if every one of them stood up and go, we're sending every high school student to this place because of you, right? That would never happen. But hopefully this will make my point and you leave there thinking, wow, you just nailed it. Excuse me. What if everybody handed me a sheet of paper and signed it and says, I will get you 10 student, enrollment's a major driver, the measure of success here. I wouldn't go around bragging about that. I wouldn't. Because I don't think that's what the Almighty wants, right? So this is going to be strange. This is this Catholic, dysfunctional Irish Catholic. Sorry to interrupt you. You got to understand that. It's just take it in stride and see what happens. Because at 2 o'clock today, there could be a problem, right? I don't know if that makes sense. It's this karma thing, and for some reason, the higher power is involved in this. It's like, I'm here to serve. I'm also here to serve you. I'm grateful that you're in my life, and I'm thankful for it. Right. And
so somehow the words that you share, I mean, you've got to go in front of a bunch of people and, just a little bit later today, that somehow that can be, almost an emissary of the Lord working through us.
Right. I guess what I'd say is my humility has been intensified because of my spirituality. I don't know if that makes sense. And some of it is real, some of it is the upbringing, right? It's still, and it's not.
But you also said that your confidence or your sense of purpose has been strengthened as well. So it's like there's a duality there at least, right? That humility and confidence are simultaneously strengthened.
Yeah, let me talk about that for a minute. You know, if you're authentic, in my opinion, and honest, then you can be confident, right? I really do think humility and authenticity, and I mentioned this the other day at a speech, actually, at that gala I was talking about, intensifies your credibility. It's worked for me in this community. I've been tolerated because I speak up, right? And sometimes humor is a defense mechanism, and sometimes I live in humor, right? And people tolerate me, which I appreciate. I've always been, some people would say, he doesn't care what you think of him. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I do have, I'm old, I've matured. I do have this mindset of, hey, they're entitled to their own opinion. And, as a leader, you make enemies no matter what you do. Okay, good. You get that. I'm okay with that. So I have this baseline confidence, I think. Yes, I've been told sometimes you're too confident, and I understand that. You don't worry enough, or somebody told me, I wish you'd worry more about your legacy as a joke, which I don't, right? But I seem to have more of it. What I mean is I don't question everything I do to myself as much anymore, right? It used to be, I go to a board meeting, or I come here, and I act like no big deal at the meeting, and tell the truth, be authentic, which some people appreciate. But in the car ride home, I'm like, why did you open your mouth? I used to be like that, right? You represent this institution. Not worried about how I look. You do have, you are a leader of this institution. Now it's like, nice job, Bob, to yourself. I don't know, does that make sense?
It almost sounds like you've through your maturation, through your transformation, you found yourself in alignment with what you believe you're called to do.
Sure.
And so that gives you, when you speak, it gives your voice a sense of, all of that flows through your voice, and so you can just leave with the kind of assurance that I don't know, that those words are in alignment with what are your values and what it is that you hope to leave behind, and how you lead this institution, and there's like an alignment there.
Right. Yeah, that's well said. You have this habit of like making it sound more educated. You're better at verbal skills than I'll ever be. But that's exactly right, sir. This leadership thing, though, because you mentioned that, I think it has. I read a book. Karen Gross wrote this book called Quiet
Leadership. Yeah,
I read it
Karen's
twice.
Great.
I read it twice.
Did you?
Yeah, which is unusual for me.
Uh-huh.
And when I say that, the second time I went in, I read certain parts of it, particularly when she talked about quiet leadership. That resonated with me. I do that quite a bit. I don't use power, right? I don't, but I don't give it up. I got to have people here know that I'm in charge. Maybe that's part of the spirituality journey, is that I'm very in tune to that. They need somebody, a leader. I am not good at getting compliments, right? Dysfunctional Irish Catholic, Midwest. I am not good at getting compliments. I don't do well with them. But when I get them, and they're real, it's wonderful. And, you have somebody say to me in those chairs, we need your leadership right now. Right? You've supplied it in the past, right? And so I consider that another tiny little miracle, right? That it just says, okay, step it up, right? Time to go micromanage. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to answer where the spirituality and the higher power and the Almighty fit in, but it's what I do want you to know, sir, is, and I think you'll appreciate that, I'm much more vocal about it wherever I am, right? And a lot of times I got to give speeches or talks. And, I act all naive sometimes. I'm not that naive. I read a room very well now, right? That's a skill set you develop, a tradecraft. But, sometimes in the beginning, okay, got to be careful. Who knows? Maybe there's 25,000 non-believers here and all this other stuff, right? The confidence comes with I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was. I didn't know who he was. I spent the whole weekend reading about him. Wow, pretty cool guy. He had some good thoughts. I'd say that to anybody. Anybody, right? Does that make sense? It's like, well, I thought you were Mr. Honest, Mr. Authentic. Well, I'm representing the institution, right? I've got to, play things down the middle. But for some reason, there's more confidence in saying things that you really mean, even if the room isn't, you're not saying it to the right people.
Yeah, that there's something that's enabled you to step into those arenas.
Yes.
That are heightened emotion, tension, division, but you can step in there with some grace.
Right. That's the spiritual part. But I don't want to forget about the science part. Experience, right? I said this to a vice president the other day. Get me in front of the counselors, right? See what you can do. All right, I'm willing to do that. Oh, yeah. And then I said, and if I mess that up, I shouldn't be doing this job after 12 and a half or 13 years, right? Some of this is the science, is the experience. You learn from the past, right? And you don't have to weigh in on everything. Use a baseball analogy. I'm much better at taking pitches, right, rather than swinging at them, right? And I think that comes with experience. And that also comes with, putting your ego and pride at check. That's when I get in trouble. It's when I mouth off, right? Put that in check, get help. There's people with expertise out there. So as you said, there's a science part to it, and then there's the spirituality.
Which it sounds like has come together into this current that is giving you a sense of, I don't know, like a license to lead or something like that.
Well, I'm going to say this, and this is where I can sum everything up I've talked about. I am going to regret telling you this, because I am. Something bad is going to happen. I'm being dramatic.
If we don't get in a little trouble, we're not leading.
Okay, I'm going to say this to you, and this is where the karma comes in. I'm locked in right now on everything here.
That's exciting.
And I've never been there. Now, I just blew it. Because at 2 o'clock today, something bad will happen, or somebody will call me and say, you said this 3 years ago, we're going to take, I don't know if that makes sense. But
you're locked in right now. Well, that kind of, I think that's a really good place to kind of step into where we maybe can start to conclude. But I have something that I just want to talk about, and it might open up a whole box. And that's one of the other things that I really care about, is we take as much time as we need to tell the whole story. But this was a thought that I came into this, and it kind of starts with a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. I just want to read that. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And so I was thinking about why I wanted to interview you so much. And I just think of all of the threads just in our lives, yours and mine, that are connected in this tapestry, in this garment. That boy, there's a kid named Jaden Bowles. I don't know if you know him. He's one of your students. He is a phenomenal student. He's one of the kids I've mentored, man.
What's he studying? Do you remember?
He just decided to go into medicine. So he was going to go into OT. But I mean, this kid is just so high powered. There's some people where it's like, this is the type of person who's going to change the world, and you meet him every once in a while. And Jaden, and I'm saying this publicly as a blessing to him, because he's an inspiration for me. But anyway, he's one of your students, and he's somebody I've mentored forever and ever, and you've provided an institution where he can go and realize his potential. The OT school, you helped found the doctorate in occupational therapy. My nanny right now is in your OT school. And she is, actually go to your OT school to find nannies, because they're a series of the most phenomenal people I've ever met.
That's nice to hear.
They're kind, they're gracious, they're competent, they're compassionate. And it's like, boy, if you want a nanny, go to the OT school.
Well, that's interesting. That's why they're in the field. Think about it, right? Isn't that interesting? Oh, that's nice to hear. What's what does he want to study? PA or medicine or what?
Medicine.
He wants to go into
PA. He was like 16 when he got into college or something like that.
I know who he is. I don't know much about him, but I know the name.
So I think he's on a bit of a journey, but I think medicine is what he's decided he wants to go into.
See, I'm going to comment. That's why higher ed's important. Right. I mean, I'm a big believer in the trade school. No, we're getting off topic, but I'm a big believer in the trade schools, associate degrees.
Of course, yeah.
But the journey, why? Transformation takes time, which is actually what I'm going to say to these counselors in 2 hours or an hour and a half. It takes time. I'm selling higher ed right now, right? Coming here is a journey. And I've heard kids say, I want to be a teacher. Nope, I decided I'm going to be a PA. Nope, I'm going to be a geologist, right? I think that's what this place does. So I'm putting my salesperson hat on, but about higher ed. But that's a nice story to hear. I love what you said about OT.
Well, and I want to talk about the 10 other pieces where our tapestry is tied together as well. And then I want to go back into that because I want to hear about your vision for higher ed, because I think that's a big part of this conversation, because I'm also a beneficiary of a liberal arts education. But I also think about what you've contributed to medicine, So my wife right now she's the director of medical education over at Billings Clinic, and they're putting together a program to train rural physicians, right? And some of the physicians, probably some of the ones that are part of, doing things like training rural physicians on how to put in a central line, right? Because if somebody, cuts their leg off, on the farm and goes to a rural hospital, right, and you can't put in a central line to get them to Billings Clinic, where we have, some of the stuff that you were talking about as far as your surgery room, then that person's going to bleed out and die, right? And there's all these like micro skills that we can train them at Billings Clinic to take back to these rural towns so that they can care for people in ways that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. And so it's the surgeons I know over at Billings Clinic that are a big part of this program, and my wife is involved in this. And also like the dedication of medical professionals saved my son's life. So the people who contributed to this field at the highest level, and heart surgery is at the highest level, and my son has heart problems. I mean, he's got just about every problem under the sun. But these are the ways that our lives are tied together, and there's so many more. Like I'm taking a bunch of kids from YBGR climbing on Saturday, because that's part of my ministry and part of my service. And I know you're on the board over there, and you just think of like this is a conversation with two people, right?
Yeah.
Two people who want to serve Billings.
Yeah.
And there are an endless number of ways that our worlds are tied together. And so I just come to this conversation with immense gratitude for your leadership and for your legacy.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You were born to serve. It took me a while to get that.
It took me a while too, Bob.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. I have to say this. We have to train future healthcare providers to take a good history and physical.
Okay.
Put the hands on somebody and talk to them. That's where I would start. I have to say that. That's what we brought to the PA program. And it worked. Because if you talk to patients, look at them, you're going to get more, and you're going to be able to treat them better. And then the physical exam has gone away with all x-rays and things. Now we're getting medical, and I probably overstepped, but I'm sure your wife has figured that out.
But that's part of, I think that you're at a point in your life where you're taking, a career, a lifetime of wisdom in both of these fields. I mean, liberal arts, medicine, leadership, and it's like, what are the things that you want to insist are important? And probably one of them is that medicine has to still be physical. It has to be interpersonal. It has to be relational. And if we lose that, and it just goes into charts and numbers and X-rays and et cetera, then it loses something essential.
Right, and I appreciate having people put central lines in people that may have lost a limb and are bleeding out. I mean, you're not going to do a complete history and physical. You're going to go to work on that. You need a large bore IV, obviously, to get blood or fluids in. So that's important too. But it all starts with the history and physical. Okay, I digress.
That's all right. Let's talk about this though. Liberal arts education. I know enrollment is down at Rocky right now.
Right.
And this is the ship that you captain, and it's one that I view as utterly essential. Can you imagine Billings without Rocky?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that to like emphasize what an important role these institutions have. I mean, can you imagine Billings without Billings Clinic? If we don't have competent leaders who step into these roles and fight for these things, then they go away. We lose things.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So we did. We had the worst enrollment hit. I'll continue using that term that I've seen in 15 years, and since we started collecting data, real data, 15 years worse. I think the first thing you need to do, and I don't know if I'm actually answering any questions that you just talked about, but I'll give you my view is the first thing you got to do is you got to look at the product. You got to look at yourself in the mirror. I really firmly believe that. That gets back to that courageous authenticity. You mentioned that, and some people are like, what do you mean? We're not doing it well, that kind of thing. But you have to. I am telling you, everybody I talk to that stays here as a student, everybody, and I talk to people or have graduated, loved their experience here, right? Loved it. The sacred relationship that exists between faculty and students is what makes this place what it is. Sure, the liberal arts curriculum is very, very important. I wish I had had more of it. I really do. You know, my main goal was to get into medical school, so I took the 4 courses and then was a psych major. And I was a psych major because it was one of the shortest lines at registration, right? That's me at, 18 or whatever. But liberal arts is important. But that product of what happens, and I am convinced it's that sacred relationship, small classrooms. The faculty will call students and ask them where they are if they don't show up. The faculty get upset when the students have to travel for sports. I mean, I think that sacred relationship where the students know the faculty's name and they can talk to them about their transformation is very, very important. It seems to me, when you said if Rocky goes away or if higher ed, I'll talk to you about higher ed. There does seem to be this push for workforce. Get them out as soon as you can. Now, I want to preface this by telling you the diamond in this city is City College. I don't know if you've ever been out.
Oh, man, I love it. Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Absolutely.
So I've done it twice. It's some educator for a day. I went the first time and I was like a child. I was so excited. They're under the roof of some car. I mean, and they're all overlooking at fish tanks and all these different things. It's the associate degrees, the trades, the welding, that all that's are so important.
So important. Yeah.
So important. And yeah, I understand you can make money, you don't have debt, things like that. I get all of that. Very, very important. Once again, City College is a diamond here. But let's talk about, traditional, undergrad education, right? I think, I would have been embarrassed if you'd seen me as 18, right? I was immature. I was all sorts of, I wasn't where I am now, that's for sure. It's a journey, and I already mentioned this. Supposedly, part of our experience here is that you're going to get transformed a little bit. Not completely, but a little bit. Journey is long, as you and I have talked about. Maybe you build some resilience. Maybe you learn about compassionate listening. Maybe you learn some things, but it takes time. There seems to be a rush to get people through. For instance, in high school, I'm going to take a bunch of college courses so I can get done in 3 years. Okay, let's use me as an example. I could not imagine graduating from the University of Notre Dame at 20 years of age, ready to go into the workforce. I wouldn't have lasted a day, right? College is about wisdom, not just knowledge and subject. It's about wisdom. It's about meeting other people, understanding there's other ideas. My 2 girls, the first day had issues with their roommate, right? They had to fight through that. That was good for them, right? That was good for them. I use that as an example. But it seems to be there's this big thing about rushing them through. I mean, even our legislators have talked about workforce. And, I've been asked about us starting associate degrees. We wouldn't do that, right? We're not going to repeat We're not going to repeat what some other places do well, right? We're not going to do nursing. They do it very well up the street. Okay, we're certainly not going to do engineering. They do it exceptionally well 2 and 3.5 hours west of us. We're just not, right? We're not. We're going to stay to our own identity, hope it works. But part of this journey, this transformation, it takes time. I heard another college president outside the state. It's imperative that you get your degree in 4 years, right? 3 if you can, because we need you out there. I don't care if you take 5 or 6, man. I don't, imagine leaving at 22, 23, a little bit more mature, some wisdom about how earth works, or life works, I should say, So that's kind of my pitch on higher education, and I'll probably say that next door at noon. Transformation takes time. What's the rush? Particularly when you're 20 or 21. Now, that's maybe a little bit of an old school, I'm a dinosaur kind of thing, but I don't understand that, right? I do understand, you have to have value. What's your value proposition, right? Are they all getting jobs? Well, 89% of our students are either in jobs or graduate school. That's important. Mm-hmm. Data is important. Outcomes is important. Outcomes are as important for higher ed right now as they are for any institution in this community. Mm. It is about outcomes. That's what parents want. Is my child going to get a job? Is my child going to go to grad school? Is my child going to want their dream? Right? Sometimes your dream gets changed, right? You know, that's transformation. Mm-hmm. And you go down another route and you become the best physician or best PA in the planet, that kind of thing, even though you wanted to teach or you wanted to go into geology. That's part of everything. Mm. And there is this movement to get them through. Mm-hmm. But, you know, then the debt, you know, now I'm selling our college, you know.
I just want to pause there, and then you can talk about that a little bit. Because I think about my own liberal arts education, and let's just for a moment pretend that I'm a leader, that I have capacity as a leader, that, you know, that maybe what I'm doing can make a difference. I would not be the critical thinker that I am. I would not be... I would not have the education, I would not have the background, I would not have the knowledge base to be effective without my liberal arts education. Yeah. And it, I mean, boy, my maturation growth curve took a lot longer than just my liberal arts education. But, you know, I mean, you just think, like, I just think back, and, you know, it's like I went to classes with the most brilliant people I've ever met, and I was one of, you know, 18 students, right? And they did, like, if you didn't show up, they did call you, and they did form those types of relationships. And like, I could walk into their office and talk about Kant or Nietzsche or something like that, right? And that was part of my growth curve, and it was to be where I'm at now. I'm incredibly indebted to that education and that experience, which is, it's not easy to summarize that. I mean, you're right. Like, ultimately, these kids have to be able to get jobs. These kids have to be able to take steps towards realizing an outcome. But there is something in the milieu of liberal arts where you're just going through a process that makes you a richer, more compassionate, more caring person, because you have to look at the whole world, like you have to take Western Civ no matter what major you're in, and that's actually really important.
I'm going to get back to what I told you earlier. Here's what I think a liberal arts curriculum does, and we do that here. I think it really is real education. You're not just getting trained. And, you know, I think of myself in college. It's all about a good GPA. Then I got to take the MedCats to get into medical school, right? So you have to take these 4 science courses. You have to major. I did major in an arts and letters discipline, psychology. But, you know, I joked before about it was short line at registry, but I also knew that was going to boost my GPA, right? You know, those courses. I didn't have the right mindset. It's interesting. Now that I'm in this job, I'm more curious about things. I'm more of a critical thinker. I'm more skeptical, which makes it a little cynical at times, but I'm more skeptical. I question things, particularly data. I don't know what's happened to me. You know, it's so I simplify it. I think part of the liberal arts curriculum is where you really get educated. You're not getting just trained. You know, you talked about Kant or Kierkegaard, right? I mean, that's education. The Krebs cycle in medicine, you're memorizing. Right? Do you really understand? Maybe you know what the outcome is, and maybe that's not for instance, our patient that had the hunting accident, right? There's a pathway to take care of them. Airway, breathing, circulation, right? That kind of thing. You are trained. It's almost like a rote memorization, right? It's all memorizing. And then, you know, even in medical school, you're doing a lot of memorizing. But when you go do your residency, that's where you learn the art of medicine, right? And that's how I differentiate a liberal arts education. It's education. I'm telling you, man, I could talk to you about a lot of different things. Probably not Kant or Kierkegaard, but I could probably talk to you about a lot of different things that I couldn't do before. I'm more curious. Does that make sense?
Of course.
More skeptical, too, and a good skeptical. No, wait a minute. You know, have you thought of it? Yeah.
Bob, I want to talk about one last thing, and then maybe we can kind of conclude, because I know you've got some important people you got to talk to in just a minute here. But and this is so my journey really started. I was a private practice counselor for quite some time, but it started back in 2018, 2019 when a young girl took her own life. It was Olivia. It was really close to my practice.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this. Yeah.
Shattered my world. in a way that was not easy to put back together. And, we just had another young girl take her own life in our community just a few days ago. I'm just 12, 13 years old. And it's like there's an existential breakage that happens when those things, when you're close to them. And when you think about, what kind of a world we live in where a 12 or a 13-year-old girl can come to those conclusions. And so it was right around the birth of my daughter. And I held her in my arms, and I was just forced to ask these really hard questions. And to me, the conclusion I came to was that it's not enough just for me to be a good father, that I am obligated to go make the world a better place, because that's the world that she has to grow up in. And that has changed my trajectory completely. Like, I've never been the same. Everything I do is pretty oriented around that as an idea of honoring what has been lost. And so you and I met after a tragedy that rocked our community as well. Chandler Stalkup his life was taken, and he was one of your students. And I know that as an outcome of that, you were also doing some really hard soul searching.
Yeah, it's interesting. When it happened, I didn't want to make a big deal about it, right? For a lot of different reasons. What actually went down, I didn't want to make sure anything got instigated. It got worse. I had to worry about our student athletes, the family, and everything. I don't know if I shared this with you, but I will now. About a year prior to his death, I was at Denver International Airport, right? And I was just on the escalator, and there was this family coming down, right? Mom, dad, it looked like a sister. Yeah, it was a sister, an older sister, and then this young guy. And they were all wearing Rocky gear in Denver. Right? And I was thinking to myself, who the hell wears Rocky gear? Right? Yeah. Denver, right? And I wasn't smart enough to think, well, they probably were on a trip or something. So I stumbled my way off the escalator to go the other way. I became what I sometimes am, is an excitable boy. And I ran around, and I said, what's with the Rocky stuff? And we just visited there, right? We're being recruited. And, I don't ever, well, I'm the president. I never play that card right away. But I did here. And I said, well, I'm actually the president. Excuse the way I'm dressed, because I'm traveling, but I'm actually the president. Oh, we shook hands. Did you enjoy your visit? Yeah. Well, we'll take good care of him, all right, if this works out. What's he studying? Health and human performance. Wow. Last thing I said to this family, we'll keep him safe. And it was this kid.
It's Chandler.
I don't know if you knew that. And, you don't want to make it about yourself. Right? It's not about you. The guy lost his life. His parents are, scarred forever. Yeah, it was a kid. Come on. And, but boy, I couldn't let that go. And I still don't.
It haunts you.
It haunts me. You try, this is going to sound strange. Is there any good that can come from it? Any good? I don't know. But it haunted me. And it was I didn't, when everything went down and I was at the hospital and he was on life support, it was the sister that came up to me. Because you don't remember us, do you? I said, I'm sorry, I don't. Have I met? Yeah, we're the family in Denver. And I said, I'm sorry. I promise you we keep you safe. Yeah, on my watch. But, I'm a firm believer in this, and maybe part of this, and I don't know if you asked this or whatever, maybe part of this is the spirituality component. Good is going to come out of this. We've done some things internally where that this incident has given us the strength to say, you ain't going to parties at 3 in the morning. Drinking's out. Sorry, I know it's those kind of things. We put in some safeguards. That's probably what I should say. So maybe there's some good that came out of it. But yeah, it haunts me. And it's maybe it haunts me for the wrong way. It happened on my watch. They send them here. They expect them to be kept safe, right? But what came out of that, and where we eventually met, and you have done a terrific job with this, is, I was talking to somebody in the community, said, you want to do something, don't you? I said, and that's where mentoring should come in, and put things together. I don't mean to be so crass, but we get them before they break bad, right? Maybe it's outdoors, maybe it's mentoring, whatever. So that's the Chandler.
Well, so then in our connection there, just to kind of pick up this, because to me it's ultimately, as a counselor, as somebody who's worked in this field, these tragedies they're just things that they also haunt me, and so I'm constantly asking myself this question of how do we make meaning out of tragedy, out of unbelievable tragedy. And it's like, I just think about the thread between you and I. So you initiated this coalition of the mentoring groups. Yeah. Well, you got everybody together. Yeah. And had this conversation, because mentoring is one of the answers, right? Like, it's not the only answer, but it's one of the answers.
It is one of the answers, yeah.
For how we intervene, in these kids' lives in ways that, and actually this is something that I quote all the time. There's a study from the criminal justice system where, there's kids that either went on to recidivize or they went on to live meaningful lives. And they talked about their ACE scores, like really high ACE scores. And the one commonality that all these kids had that went on to lead healthy, protective lives was that they could think of somebody who believed in them. And it could have been a mentor, it could have been a teacher, it could have been a coach, but there was somebody who filled that attachment gap and saw their potential. And just that little voice in their lives, just that singular person was sometimes enough to change their trajectory. And so to me, mentorship it's one of these answers that we have to fight for. And so out of, you the project that you initiated, and we formed the mentoring work group. And there's so many people fighting so hard for this, for these kids and for mentorship. And so to me, it's an enormous part of, it is like that work group that I've helped develop, that you initiated, that Jennifer Owen is also a big part of. That's a collective voice that came out of a tragedy. Yeah. And we're just getting started as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And it's like, how do we carry this forward? But how do we carry them forward? I mean, I have a picture of Olivia on my computer, and I look at it on a regular basis because she reminds me of why what I do is so important, and the debt that I have to my daughter. And it's something that I'm like, I don't know what else to do about that, but to fight to try to make the world a better place.
Yeah, I think you got to fight every day. I mean, I don't have any words of wisdom. I will comment on mentoring. It's interesting when you talk to some people that say, well, I had a great mentor, right? Well, I had a great mentor. Because initially when I talked to Jennifer, I said, well, yeah, mentoring seems like it's part of it. Not everybody can mentor. I actually was joking with her. If I get assigned a student or a young kid, let's say, that doesn't have very nice clothes or hasn't eaten, I'm just going to go feed them and give them clothes. And Jennifer said, well, that's not mentoring, which I knew. But it's like, I think there is a skill set. But I've been thinking a lot since this started. There have been various times through my life, once again, maybe it's tiny little miracles, where somebody has said something to me that has resonated with me, right? That has resonated with me. I'm going to share this, which I don't think I've ever told. I haven't even told my wife this, but what was it? Organic chemistry. No, not organic chemistry. It was biochemistry. And it was very hard. And when I went to Notre Dame, and it was a very hard course, and I was getting a C in it, right, which was actually a gift. But I was worried it was going to mess with my GPA, right? It was crunch time, and it did. I didn't get in right away. And I remember going and visiting as a 19, 20-year-old with a TA that ran the lab portion. And I had gotten a B in the lab, right? And I went and visited with him. And, I'm not usually like this. I would never do this now, but, I'm a young kid. And I just, listen, man, if I don't have an A in this, it means the difference between a 3.1 GPA and a 2.8. This resonates with you. Mm-hmm. Very surprised I did that, right? But, it was mainly just to talk, is there anything I can do? Is there anything I can do, to make this better, right? Is there anything I can do? Can I write more? I just really need this. Which is the only time I ever did something like this. It really is. Maybe this was the spiritual awakening or whatever.
Please help me get my degree out. Yeah.
I literally, if it was a little bit more mature, I would have offered him some money. But I'm just like sitting there. It turned into a little bit of begging and playing the victim. This could mess up getting into med school. 19, 20, maybe 20. And I'll never forget, they had a beard. He was like you. And he looked at me and goes, I can't change your grade. You know that. said, no, I'm not asking you to change it. I'm just asking if I can do something to make it better. I can't change it. I'm sorry. Now you have the final coming up, right? And this is a class of like 150. Right? You have the final coming up in a month. Knock that out. And maybe you'll get the B that you want instead of the C because it's a 4 credit card. So, but, okay, but there's no other I wouldn't let it go, right? I remember sitting at his desk, and he goes, no, I'm just going to tell you, Bob, I'm not going to change the grade. It's in. I'm just not going to do it. So, okay, and I walked out. When it was time to take the test, like a month from now, and I hadn't seen the guy because the lab part was over, he's up proctoring it in front of 150 people, and he caught my eye, and he did that.
Wow.
Right. And I don't know if that's a form of mentoring.
Yeah, but he was pulling for you.
Yeah, he was pulling for me, and I don't know. It's just, for me, I wish I'd had executive coaching. I wish I had had more mentoring. I'll power through on my own. That's kind of the mindset I've had. What I think I've realized, there have been various people, even though there's short-lived moments, that have helped mentor me. And it's made me better. It's made me better. It is extremely joyful to help out a young person. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I just even tie back to some of the things that we've talked about, that principle of courageous authenticity that has guided you, but also there's maybe a little bit of a, an allowance for, but I could have used some help along the way.
Oh, absolutely. If especially with this job.
Yeah.
We have a good board and a great board chair, but for 10 years, 11 years, and they're good people. I always left board meetings wondering, why did I say that? As it turned out, it was always ego that gets you in trouble, or pride. Sometimes you got to stand up for things. But I wish I had board relationship course. Keep your mouth shut, right? There's number one. All right, speak when you need to speak. Don't let your pride get in the way. Just these. I'm exaggerating, of course, and trying to be funny, but it's like I value expertise, right? I really do. And my transformation, 5 years ago, we worked through it. Things will be fine. That's how you build resilience. I will now tell you there is some mental health problems in this country. Whoa, right? I probably have some, don't even realize it, but that's kind of like, I tell you that because that's kind of my transformation. I now realize that, where it used to be just power through. So yeah, it's just being honest, with how you feel and everything, right? Yeah.
How do we sum this up? What we've talked about? We've been talking for quite some time now. And
when you send me the questions, I got to talk about, I hate that. And then a second thing, who's going to listen to this? Because if anybody on this campus listens to it, they'll never let me forget it. As a joke, I used to worry in the community after I spoke. I go, please, dear God, don't let it get back to these 5 people. As a joke, because they sometimes make fun of it, take pictures, things like that. This has been cathartic. This has been therapeutic. And it's made me think more. That's my end.
So when you first got the questions, there were some hard questions that I sent you before.
It wasn't so much they were hard. I don't really like talking about my background and myself, right? It comes from that weird humility thing that I've got to let go of, right? It's just, I don't like talking about what I've done and, the cancer, the kids and everything. I'd rather hear your stories, right? Your dad's very interesting. This compassionate listening really, I read his book right, once. I'm going back to it. It's over there. I read one book. He gave me a couple. I'm fascinated by it because I think I'm a compassionate person, and I think that comes from being a provider and everything else. But I could do a much better job at listening. And I guess I'll finish it with this. The thing you gave me, and Saturday mornings are tough. I got preview day. So I had to leave after a couple hours at the last one you had. Well, actually, we had a family issue I had to deal with. But we had an exercise where I do this all the time. do this all the time, man. I've been there. And I'm so anxious to say what happened that I stopped listening and I cut him off. And there's been many times I got that beat, you know, not malignantly, but, you know, people I know, people I don't know. Because I always feel that if they understand that I have been there too, you know, you fall in a hole, I jump down there on because I know the way out kind of thing, right? And when we did that exercise, it emphasized, just listen, you know. And I don't know if that comes from pride or you're trying to show them that you've been there, but sometimes I have to catch myself. And I haven't said it in a while. I got that beat. Or one of my other favorites, I got a million of them, man, stuff I've been through, let me tell you. And I don't know if that's me double secretly playing the victim, which can be very comforting to people, or if there's a little bit of pride. I always help them, trying to be compassionate by showing them that I've been there and maybe they can learn. Do you remember this exercise? Of course you do, right? And I realized, just listen.
Which to me is so interesting, because one of the things, and this came through, you know, for the leadership award, like when you were talking about that one of the things you're really committed to is being a lifelong learner. And I just want to say, Bob, that this podcast, the journey it is a journey, and it's a study in the people around me, because I specifically want to find people who have overcome some of the things that I know that I'll be up against.
That you've overcome.
Yeah, maybe that, but it's this curiosity to find the people who have carried us forward and try to figure out what makes them tick, what's gotten them to the other side, what's enabled them to stay effective, to finish well. That's something my dad always talks about, you know, to finish well.
Finish well, yeah. I'm worried about that personally, actually, between you and me. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I hadn't heard that from your dad. Yeah, it's something that's on my mind right now. It's one of the reasons I won't leave right now. You know, you never want, I'm interrupting you, I'm sorry. You never want to stay too long, right? I can't walk away now because we had a down year. It would bother me the rest of my life, even if we left town, right? It would just bother me the rest of my life, because this was a down year. You know, you got to fix it, you got to micromanage, you got to pull together, you got to have a common pursuit. You know, you get the board behind you, which they are. You be truthful and honest about where you are, and then you come up with a plan you try to execute. If I were just to say, oh, that's it for me this year, you guys can figure it out, that would bother me, and I will not do that. Now, I don't know, finish well, but then there's the karma thing. I will not finish well. Something will happen. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Because it's happened. It's happened.
Yeah. Well, Bob, I think you're going to finish well, and I also know that I want you to know that you've got some partners. That myself, my dad, we're committed to you, to this vision that you have for this incredible institution, Rocky. But yeah, I'm on a quest. I want to know what enables somebody to, you know, lose surgery, right? The thing that you gave everything to face the kind of odds that you faced, and then to somehow transform into, you know, this is a whole new terrain, right? Like, you're a leader for a whole new institution, and I want to understand that.
Yeah, I have to too. Sometimes you go through it, you don't think of it.
You just do it, right?
Yeah, somebody said to me the other day, this is a while ago, well, you've had 2 great careers. You must feel really lucky. I've just never thought of it that way. Yeah. You know, what's in front of you, right? But I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, Bob, it's been just an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely.
And just know that, I mean, in any way that I can be, we're on your team.
You already have.
And just believe in you. And I'm incredibly grateful for your service, both to the field of medicine and then to liberal arts as well. And so. Back
at you. And as I told you, this was therapeutic. I think it probably helped me more than you.
Thank you so much, Bob.
You got it, brother. Appreciate you. Is that okay?
Thank you for listening to the Pay Love Forward podcast. If this conversation with Dr. Bob Wilmouth moved you, inspired you, or made you pause to reflect, don't let it in there. Pay Love Forward is more than a podcast. It's a movement, a community, a way of being. At its heart is a simple commitment: invest in others in ways that multiply. Dr. Wilmouth's story reminds us that leadership at its best is an act of love, one that prepares the ground for those who will come after. In partnership with Resilient Stories, we're committed to hearing the story within the story, the deeper narratives of courage, compassion, and renewal that remind us who we are and what we're capable of together. If you'd like to walk with us, find a mentor, find a mentee, and join one of our community gatherings. You can connect through Facebook or visit us at www.payloveforward.net to learn more. Let's keep building something beautiful together.